Fate's Day Night. The story of Shiro Emiya, a young man and wannabe magus, dreaming of one day becoming a hero of justice after a tragedy in his childhood. One fateful night, he is haplessly thrown into what is known as the Holy Grail War, fighting for his dreams and ambitions alongside his servant, Saber. Garden of Sinners, also known as Kara no Kyoukai. The story of Shiki Ryougi, a young woman with the eyes of death. After a near-fatal accident that killed her male alter ego and left her in a state of near death, she gained the ability to kill nearly anything she can see. This leads her down a dangerous path where she must solve various dark mysteries alongside her companion, Mikia Kokoto. But what if things were shuffled a bit? Timelines rewritten, and people moved around. Specifically, switched the places of Shiro Emiya and Shiki Ryougi. And that is going to be the concept of our story here. This is Fate's Day Night Unlimited Blade Works, told from a different perspective, with events changing to fit around a new character. Not every detail is fully fleshed out, and some things are going to be glossed over. This will not be an exact play-by-play, but I will present the core ideas and narratives that define and shape this timeline. This is where Shiki, raised as Shiki Emiya, finds herself looking at a strange woman, materialized from thin air to protect her. This woman, no older than herself, faces her and speaks.
I ask you, are you my master?
A burning hellscape as far as the eye could see. That was all that was left of the world that young Shiki once knew. The only sound around her as she lay, staring at the blackened sky, is the crackling of fire. Any screams and cries that echoed about have long since been silenced. But Shiki would not be joining them. Just as she was about to completely slip into the darkness, she saw the face of a man that seemed so grateful to find her. Since that fateful day, she was known as Shiki Emiya after having been adopted by the man who saved her, Kiritsugu Emiya. She learned that he was a mage, something that she was only vaguely familiar with, but truthfully, it didn't matter. Kiritsugu had planned not to teach Shiki magecraft, though he did teach her to be wary of mages. Shiki did not really care to learn magecraft anyway, but was more interested in her adopted father's stories. However, it was discovered that Shiki had a special skill. She had mystic eyes that allowed her to kill things with ease. One day, when Kiritsugu and Shiki were going for a walk, Shiki was startled by a bird that flew in her face and reflectively swung a stick that she was holding. She described it as though she saw herself tracing a line, and then the bird fell dead. Shiki attested that she hadn't always been able to do this. Even though she could now, she could only see lines appear on smaller animals. Kiritsugu thought that her eyes may have been triggered because of her near-death experience when the Grail destroyed her home. Whatever the case may be, he would have to teach her more. Even if they seemed weak now, the Mages Association would want to look into mystic eyes that could cause death. Shiki would need to know how to protect herself, specifically from mages. Sadly, Kiritsugu would not be able to teach Shiki much in the ways of anti-mage combat before passing away. However, he did give her the foundation. And so, the years passed. Shiki, now a young woman, attended Hamurahara High School, was a former kendo team member, and was known for her aloof nature. Though she seemed difficult to approach, she was actually not an unfriendly person, just not very talkative. She was on good terms with the student council president, Issei Ryudo, and she would normally have lunch with him. If not, she would eat on the roof alone. One particular day of school, she ended up asleep on the roof and woke up to the sound of a battle. She looked down to the field and saw two men fighting, one in a blue jumpsuit and the other in a crimson cloak. Their speed and power were unlike anything Shiki had ever seen before. She assumed that they must be mages of some kind. While thinking of how to sneak out of the school, the one in red spotted her, prompting the one in blue to look as well. She took off running into the school, and the man in blue followed suit. Shiki ran through the halls, stopping in a small hidden nook and pulled a knife from it. One thing Kirei had taught her was to always be prepared, even in unlikely situations. She knew this blue mage was strong, but it was just his magecraft. All she needed was one good slash. One good slash, and she could make her escape. A noise came from behind her as she fled. Shiki spun around to meet her opponent, but only saw an empty hallway. She heard a voice from behind her and spun around again, only to feel a sharp pain in her chest. The man materialized in front of her from thin air and drove his spear into her heart. She looked at him, her mystic eyes activated, but for once, she couldn't see any lines at all. Before she could even wonder what this man was, she fell to the floor, blood pooling and her life draining away. The darkness faded in, her vision growing more blurry. Her sight grew darker and darker before she lost consciousness. And suddenly, Shiki woke up, gasping for air. Her wound completely healed, although she was certain that she was dead. Having little time to really worry about that, she quickly went back home, grabbing the strange pendant that she found laying beside her. Once home, Shiki was quickly assaulted by the man in blue once again. Knowing that her eyes couldn't work on him, she did her best to fend him off until she ended up in the storage shed out back. He had the young woman cornered, but before he could make the final blow, there was a brilliant flash of light, and a literal knight in shining armor came from nowhere to repel the man in blue. The blonde knight clashed with her opponent, wielding an invisible sword, before finally forcing him to flee. Before Shiki could even get her bearings on the situation, before even getting a proper introduction, to learn that this mysterious knight is called Saber, and the man that she fought was called Lancer, Saber sensed another danger, and leapt over the house to meet it. Shiki found her standing off against the man in red from earlier. Beside him stood Rin Tosaka, a girl from her high school. Shiki told Saber to stop, and the blonde knight was overcome by a red flash coming from Shiki's hand, causing her to freeze up. Things began to de-escalate as Rin saw that Shiki was very lost during the situation, and informed her of the Holy Grail War they are now participating in. 7 mages, known as masters, summoned 7 heroic spirits, known as servants, to do battle for the chance to win the Holy Grail, an omnipotent wish-granting device. The servant that Rin had summoned was known as Assassin. Shiki was unsure of her position in this Holy Grail war, so Rin took her to the Overseer, a priest named Kirei Kotomine. He appeared to be overly delighted to find out her family name, Emiya. He explained to her that the tragedy that occurred 10 years ago was due to the previous Holy Grail War. This shifted Shiki's stance on the matter. While she did not share Kiritsugu's dream of becoming a hero of justice, nor did she have a wish of her own for the Grail, she knew she couldn't let something like that have a chance of happening again. She would remain a master with Saber as her servant, and the pair's convictions would soon be tested. As Shiki and Rin left Kotomine's church, along with their servants, they were confronted by another master. This master looked to be just a little girl with a towering behemoth of a man standing next to her. She introduced herself as Illya von Einsbern, and her servant as Berserker. Unbeknownst to her opponents, this young girl was the daughter of Kiritsugu Emiya. After the last Holy Grail War, Illya was told that her father had abandoned her after his failure, and she resented him greatly for it. When she learned of Shiki Emiya, she of course was angry, but it was less like a fiery rage and more like the icy bite of a harsh winter's wind. From her understanding, the girl had been adopted, but looking at her now, Shiki surprisingly looked so much like Kiritsugu. Was she truly adopted? Or perhaps was she really Illya's half-sister? Did he not only abandon her in that snowy castle, but also replace her? Any form of logical rationalization was long gone now in the roaring hatred welling up inside of the small girl. It was almost like a feedback loop of Berserker's mental state and her own, but still, her demeanor was icy and cold as her home, and her malice and contempt undeniable.
Berserker, eviscerate her, and bring me her head.
With those words, Illya's command seal was activated. Even if she didn't need to, as she was able to control Berserker well, she wanted to ensure the death of Shiki Emiya. Berserker rushed Shiki like an oncoming car, but Saber got between them, telling her master to run. The knight did everything in her power to keep the hulking monster away from Shiki, although she could only remain on the defensive in this battle. As the two servants raged, Rin grabbed Shiki, trying to get her away, calling out to Assassin to do something, but got no response. While they tried to escape, Illya cut them off. So now, as Saber struggled with Berserker, Shiki and Rin would struggle to fight Illya. However, the fight would not last long. Assassin materialized behind Illya, getting the drop on her. Before she could even react, he struck her in the back of the head with the grip of his gun, knocking her out. This snapped Berserker out of his fight with Saber, and he leapt forth to try and crush Assassin before he disappeared. Berserker then scooped up Illya in his arms and jumped away, prioritizing her safety more than anything else in the situation. Although Assassin had saved their lives, Rin scolded him since he could have easily taken Illya out, but he didn't. He was unable to give a proper reason for why he didn't. But what was done, and they're safe now. Rin left Shiki, swearing that tonight was just a courtesy, and that come morning, they would truly be enemies. Despite a small fight that Rin would instigate against Shiki, the two never actually became enemies. And besides, there are far more important events to cover, such as Castor's role being sadly cut short in this version of the story. Much like in the original telling, Castor lured Shiki into Ryudo Temple in an attempt to take away her command seals and therefore Saber. However, Assassin came to Shiki's aid to fight Castor. With his skills as a mage killer, he was able to gain the upper hand against Castor, even with her powerful magic. And unlike his archer counterparts, he did not see fit to spare Castor due to her threat on innocent lives, so he took her out right then and there. And though Shiki and Assassin had no real reason to be at odds, finding themselves alone did create an awkward tension that neither understood. Meanwhile, Saber rushed to the temple in order to save her master, but was met by the gate's guard. And since the role of assassin was taken by Emiya, the archer servant is left vacant. Saber ascended the staircase and was greeted by an archer with an all too familiar face.
How cruel it is that this is how we meet again, my king.
Castor, with her rule breaker, managed to summon a knight of the Round Table, Sir Tristan, child of sadness. Given the improper summoning, he is not at full power. Still, what matters most here is the mental reaction that Saber has. Saber is completely and utterly distraught to be faced against another one of her knights. If we look at the order of events from her perspective, thanks to a whole bunch of time shenanigans, there had to been maybe a day or so between her fight with Lancelot and this fight now, at most. That's not even including that she is technically fresh from killing Mordred as well, since she was summoned directly from Camlan. Archer did lament the fact that he must fight his former king, but as they were both servants, this was how things must be done. And though he was left out of the loop of what his master was doing exactly, he knew that it was nefarious. And so, he wallowed in the melancholy of how twisted fate could be to him. Regardless of reservations, the two clashed in battle. Saber was more shaky, while Archer was resolute in spite of his voiced reluctance. In their weakened states, even though Archer made sure to keep his distance between them, they became equals in battle. Archer paused, noticing that Caster had been slain, and soon they were joined by Shiki and Assassin. Archer conceded the battle, having no need to fight Saber any longer, and then vanished. Saber collapsed to her knees, reeling from this encounter, as Shiki attempted to comfort her. Ryder's assault on the school the next day went in largely the same manner. Shiki and Rin work together in order to attempt to dispel Bloodfort Andromeda, but are beaten to the punch when they find a cowering Shinji along with Ryder's mangled corpse. And with Caster out of the picture by this point, the question of who her master was really not a priority for the two. All they had left to deal with was Berserker and Lancer before it was just them. Without knowing where Lancer was, and knowing that she was no match for Illya alone, Rin decided to continue her temporary truce with Shiki indefinitely. And yes, Rin does still take Shiki out on a date in this version. While being very different from Shiro, Rin is still attracted to her surprisingly stubborn personality beneath her cool facade. Even without a martyr complex, Shiki is still the type to run into battle first and run away at the very last resort. Rin just has a thing for genuinely good, earnest, but self-destructive people. And with no more Caster interferences, things were quiet for a bit. Rin was reluctant to make the first move in attacking Illya and Berserker, but with little options or patience left, she took Shiki and Saber along into battle. Upon arriving at Einsbern Castle, they found Gilgamesh and Berserker locked in a fierce battle. They got there just in time to witness Berserker's final death and Gilgamesh slashing out Illya's eyes. This enraged Saber, but before she could even attack, Assassin struck first without warning. Gilgamesh was shot in both thighs before he could even react as Assassin carried Illya off to safety. Rin, while very much dumbfounded by this, decided not to use a command seal to have Assassin return, knowing that it was too dangerous right now. Shiki and Saber emerge to confront Gilgamesh, who is less than pleased right now, but still greets the object of his desire with casual arrogance and threats. Shinji then also joins the scene, having been waiting in the wings and claiming to be Gilgamesh's master. He taunts Shiki over the notion that she has no chance of winning, that even with his minor injuries, his servant was stronger than hers by leaps and bounds. Shiki doesn't actually care, and barely even remembers his name, referring to him as Shinjo. Before a full fight can break out, Lancer appears, ready to fight. Reluctant but under orders of his master, he attacks Rin, but Shiki has Saber block him. Now the stage is set, Saber versus Lancer, and Gilgamesh versus Shiki. The Golden Bastard plans to string Shiki up in order to make Saber submit to him. But she doesn't back down and is ready to go at it with her knife. Her true target is Shinji, figuring that if she can take him out, Gilgamesh would be on borrowed time before he disappeared. Shiki did not account for a lot of things with this plan, not that she really could. But the most important thing she overlooked was Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon. She was bombarded with noble phantasms, barely dodging them, though ultimately he was just toying with her. Soon enough, he had her cornered, ready to end this pitiful fight. But as he sent a treasure flying towards her, Shiki acted on instinct to defend herself. Her mystic eyes of death perception activated, and she saw the line she had to cut. With a single slash of her knife, she killed Gilgamesh's treasure. For most of her life, Shiki's mystic eyes never reached full power. Her near-death experience she had 10 years ago only woke them halfway. But being stabbed in the heart by a cursed spear and being revived from that Her eyes were more powerful now. She just hadn't realized it due to the thought that they wouldn't work against servants. But now she saw.
This means I can kill anything, even if the thing is the king of heroes.
Gilgamesh was of course furious that one of his possessions was so callously destroyed. He once again set a barrage upon Shiki, but now they were just like toys to her. She killed each treasure he threw at her as she closed the gaps. Fury turned into genuine concern as Gilgamesh was realizing her power. Just a step away, he became desperate and went to draw his most powerful weapon, Ea. But as he went to grab it, he hesitated. In a flash, he saw a woman in a white kimono. A woman who was the same as Shiki, but entirely different. The vision was gone before Gilgamesh could even blink, but it was still enough time for Shiki to deliver the final blow. At the same time, Saber finishes her fight with Lancer, besting him, and Shinji has run away. But outside, a different fight was going on. Assassin was tending to Illya, taking the bandages that masked his face off and tying them around her eyes, as she was barely staying conscious. However, he was still paying attention to his surroundings. He spun around and pointed his gun to the man who was approaching them, Kirei Kotomine.
How generous the Lord can be.
The false priest had been there to watch Gilgamesh retrieve the Grail from Illya, but he never imagined that he could be so fortunate for that plan to fail. Here he was now, face to face with the man he loathed, Kiritsugu Emiya. Assassin remembered Kotomine well and was surprised to find out that he was alive when he was summoned. But the hows and whys of that didn't concern him. The two would have to fight, all while Assassin did his best to protect Illya. Kotomine was strong as ever, able to keep pace with a heroic spirit, but Assassin was also stronger than in their last fight. But he was distracted. Kotomine took full advantage of the fact that Assassin was protecting his daughter to gain the upper hand. But suddenly, glimmering jewels flew in front of his face and exploded. During the chaos inside, Rin snuck out to find Assassin, having heard the two of them talk as they fought. She had a decent grasp on what was happening, as absurd as it seemed to have a heroic spirit be someone from only a few years ago. She opted to aid her servant as a dutiful master should. Plus, she wanted to do that to Kotomine since she was a child. With his opponent disoriented, Assassin used his noble phantasm, Kronos Rose. In a blink, he seemingly vanished, and in the next blink, Kotomine had bullet holes in his head, chest, and gut, collapsing to the ground. Now that the fighting was done, Assassin took the time to explain to Rin, Shiki, Saber, and Illya the true nature of the Holy Grail and its corruption. He apologized to Illya for not being strong enough to save her. And though he didn't regret most of the choices he made during the Fourth Holy Grail War, he did apologize to Saber for not being the kind of master she should have had. And as a Kiritsugu Emiya that was unable to save anyone that fateful day, he thanked Shiki. He was glad to know that at least one version of him was able to save someone. And with everything settled, the Mages Association came in. The Grail was carefully dismantled and sealed away. Saber bid farewell to her master, Rin, and Illya. Though she was unable to fully resolve her problems in this timeline, she was able to come to terms with them throughout the story. And for an epilogue, Rin takes Shiki and Illya to Clock Tower with her. And there, Shiki gets roped into some investigation work, though not in the employ of a certain redhead this time. But they'll most likely cross paths eventually. I just want to thank everyone so much for watching this video, if you made it this far. And to my subscribers, thank you so much for helping me reach 500 subscribers. And to all the people that helped me with this video, from Boyal doing the art, and my friends doing the voice acting, and my friends also helping edit the script. Thank you so much. I couldn't have done any of this without all the help I got with this. All the inspiration and the support, everything. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, it means so much. And I do plan on making more videos like this, and even better videos than this. I'm very excited to do that. I have ideas already that I want to work on, but financially, they are going to need a bit more help. So, in that vein, I have set up my Patreon again, and I've updated the tiers and everything. There are 3 tiers on my Patreon. Tier A is where you can vote on a monthly poll to decide of a movie or anime season that you want me to review. And they're going to be slightly changed up every month. Obviously, I have to take the one that got voted on off and then continue from there. At Tier 2, there are some test videos, like videos that I have an idea for, but I'm not really sure how well they'll do. So I want people to kind of see it, see what they think about it, and then create a series off of it. Though the initial pilot video, as I'll call it, will always be Patreon exclusive. And then in the EX tier, I'm going to have a Discord open where there will be a monthly watch-along of an anime movie. So every month, fans and myself can get together and watch a movie. I think that'd be really fun. I still have to work out the details of how that'll work, but that's definitely going to be a thing that happens. And obviously with all of them, you're going to have a name slide across the screen at the end screen as my Patreon shoutouts. So yeah, if any of that sounds appealing to you, or if you just simply want to help me fund these bigger projects that I have in mind, please check out my Patreon down in the description below. It's underneath all of the plugs for all the people that helped me. They are the most important in this situation, so they go right on top. So be sure to check all of them out, and follow me in the usual places. Again, everything is in the description below for however you want to follow me and all that. But definitely check out my friends who have plugs to give. Once again, I can't thank you enough for watching, and I'll catch you next time in the void. Later.